Hello everybody and welcome to the latest episode of the Royal Blue Podcast. I'm your host Conor O'Neill, joined today by Joe Thomas and Gav Buckland as we look ahead to Everton's game against Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park on Saturday afternoon. I said on Monday that we always seem to say, but this really is a huge game for the Blues as they go in search of 3 vital points to move themselves closer to Premier League safety. Joe, we'll get straight into it because, there's nowhere else to start other than this is a very, very big game for Sean Dyche's side.
Huge, isn't it? Absolutely huge. And to be honest, I think I'm pretty terrified. After having seen those last 2 performances from Everton, I think there was obviously I know that there are other circumstances that affected things like the Dominic Calvert-Lewin's injury, Decore's suspension, and some of the other injuries and issues and things like that, which are going to still be a factor for this week. Some of them, but they were 2 pretty worrying performances, and this is a big game, Palace. And I keep thinking for ages, I was looking at that Fulham game and I was looking at it with hope and thinking in my head for Everton to build towards the target points that I think we need to stay up. It really relied on getting 3 points at home to Fulham. And then obviously that didn't happen. And Everton got a little bit of a let off because the teams around them were so horrendously poor, albeit in difficult fixtures last weekend. But they're just not going to get that many second chances, I don't think. All right, Nottingham Forest and Leicester on terrible slides and Leeds all having 1, 3 and 6 and look to be on the brink of getting out of it, back in trouble. But again, Everton need to get points on the board, and this is a difficult fixture, but it looks like one of the better opportunities to get points on the board early, given some of the other games coming up. So it really, really is a big game, and I keep trying to talk myself down from the ledge on that, but I can't really find any excuses for anything other than the very least they need a performance that suggests that they're all on the same page and working towards the same goal, and a bit of more fight and determination, coordination and organisation we've perhaps seen over the last 2 games.
Gavin, Joe used the word terrified there to describe how he's feeling ahead of tomorrow's game. I think the big reason why there's a lot of doom and gloom and a lot of fear around Evertonians is simply how bad last weekend's performance was against Fulham, because like Joe said there, for a game that Everton simply needed to win, and it was a game that they would have won. It would have moved them a step closer to safety. The performance Sean Dyche's side put in was nowhere near good enough.
Yeah, absolutely. We spoke about that on Monday, didn't we? I think terrified is it's an interesting word, isn't it? Really, it's probably true. I think as I said on Monday, that it's one thing getting beat where you put a shift in and you've just haven't had that quality, or you've had a couple of injuries and you're being stretched. I think if you get beat sometimes, and this has been the case under Dyche really, I think most games that you say, okay, just weren't good enough there, but we got something to work with. The terrifying thing in inverted commas, I think, on Saturday was the second half performance where we got ourselves back into the game. It's a big match, as Joe said. Other teams have got losable games, and in the second half we just didn't compete. We didn't seem interested. I mean, there was a lot of thing subsequently made up about the game on Saturday, that Fulham didn't have a lot to play for and were on the beach and stuff like that. And Everton with a team that were desperate need for the points. And if you'd have watched the second half, you would have thought the roles were reversed, wouldn't you? That we looked like the team on the beach with very little to play for, and Fulham looked like a team without really needing to try much. Looked like a team who needed the 3 points, and that's a terrifying thing for me on Saturday. And that was the last thing I expected from a team managed by Sean Dyche, to be honest with you. And the manager spoke as Joe's piece this morning, talking about mentality. Well, I think he needs to change the mentality for Saturday from last Saturday's second half. And that's why I'm, shall we say, terrified about tomorrow and the rest of the season, is that second half attitude against Fulham.
Joe, how does Sean Dyche change that attitude and mentality? Because obviously, in the piece you've done this morning, you allude to the fact of, he's only 11 weeks in, and this is probably a 2-year problem. And, obviously, some of these issues have been long-standing before he arrives at the club. But, like Gav said there, a lot of what we've seen, certainly, last week against Fulham, isn't what you'd expect to see from a Sean Dyche side, is it? In the sense of, kind of almost giving up and not kind of having the stomach for the fight.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's not giving up. I mean, back in the last Saturday, it was almost just, they just didn't have the quality, did they? Like, I mean, we saw when the team came out and we saw the people that were missing. You looked at that side and you looked at the bench and you thought, if they don't get off to a good start here, if they don't make this a game that Fulham just can't be bothered with because they don't need to, it's going to be a difficult one to change any momentum that's in game. And obviously, that they found that to be the case in that second half. I think just moving slightly away from your point and going back to what Sean Dyche has been saying recently, I think it's quite notable in the last week or so he started to reference the situation he inherited. He started after kind of 10 weeks of talking about, I won't talk about the previous regime or things like that, or it is what it is. There are now a few kind of more wider context pictures as the form isn't kind of going along perhaps the way that we all want it to. But I think for Palace, I think he's just got to go back to basics. I think he's got to do what he did right at the very start when he came in. And he referenced this in his press conference yesterday, talking about how use a word that Sean Dyche really likes aligned, and how probably the best performance where everyone's been on the same wavelength has been that Arsenal game, the first game under him. And you got that impression that everybody was working towards a plan, everybody knew their individual and their collective goals, and they stuck with that for, in fairness, 8, 9, 10 games. And again, in fairness, it's only really been knocked out of sync by Doucouré's suspension. And one, it's not Sean Dyche's fault that Doucouré reacted in the way that he did, and whilst we can all laugh and joke about and get frustrated with Harry Kane's embarrassing reaction to what happened, I don't think any of us can legitimately make an argument to say it shouldn't have been a red card and a 3-game ban. But that wasn't Sean Dyche's fault, and obviously the lack of depth and the lack of quality within the Everton squad for him to deal with injuries and suspensions is also not his fault. But he's got to find a way of dealing with it. And I think for Palace, I think that goes back to the 4-5-1, back to the game plan that seemed to be the easiest one for this group of players to competently work on. I couldn't really understand the 4-4-2 against Manchester United. I then certainly couldn't understand persisting with that against Fulham. I think it would be bizarre in the least if he was to go against that tomorrow, bearing in mind that he had to change it again after half an hour against Fulham. I mean, surely that gave him everything that he needed to know to say that 4-4-2 should just go in the bin and stay there until he can perhaps, relook at the squad in the summer, when in the transfer market and start to mould it in his own shape. But it's got to be 4-5-1, and it's got to just be, obviously Coleman's not going to be involved. We know that. I think he's got to put Patterson. I think he's got to put a right back at right back. And I think Godfrey's had 2 poor games on either side of the defence in a minute, and that's fair enough when you haven't got the players around you to kind of accommodate. But I know Patterson's young. I know he's experienced. I know he's inexperienced. I know he's come back from injury, but he started the season well at right back. He has had games. He played in the derby at home really well at right back. He's had some very good games there. And at some point, Dyche is going to have to start perhaps showing a little bit more faith and trust in some of the players that he hasn't chosen to put it in yet. And that's also going to go in the midfield because, 4-5-1, probably trusting, I'd go with James Garner in the centre midfield, I think, and go down that way. And all right, it might be, the problem without Doucouré is Everton don't have somebody else that can perhaps link midfield to attack. But, obviously winning games is important, but staying in them is important. And Everton haven't really stayed in the last 2 games. I know that they last until 70 minutes, only 1-0 at Old Trafford, okay. But really, it could have been 5-0 by that point. And Fulham, the minute in that second half, it looked like Fulham wanted to win that game. Everton couldn't get anywhere near them. A point isn't the worst result at Palace, or at least setting up the foundation to be difficult to beat, stay competitive, and then see what they can get from the game, with 25 minutes to go. I think that's got to be the setup. I don't think you can go out there going all guns blazing 4-4-2, trying to win, trying to play more players out of position, trying to be more experimental. I don't think you can do that tomorrow.
Gav, we are going to come on to team selection and team thoughts looking ahead to tomorrow's game. Wow. But just to go back to your point, Joe, picked up on there in terms of Arsenal and Sean Dyche, that's like the game where everything kind of come together. How much is the worry at the minute that the kind of new manager bounce has disappeared and almost old habits have crept back in, and this is, the team ultimately that got Frank Lampard sacked?
Well, I think we'll have a better idea tomorrow, won't we, really? I think if you see tomorrow when we go back to the attitude you've seen largely under Dyche, albeit Joe said, I've had a lack of quality, then I think you'd say that, there was an aberration in the second half against Fulham, really. And what disappoints me about Fulham, we're saying is we played about 15 minutes, didn't we, before half-time, and then it was that we stepped off the edge of a cliff, didn't we, in the second half? That was the disappointing thing for me. So I think we'll find out tomorrow. We'll probably find out within the first 15 minutes tomorrow. And I do think I agree. I agree totally what Joe's saying. And what everybody said this week is, why are we playing 4-4-2? We play 4-5-1 all day long with that team, and that's the thing that's worked for Dyche. And I was thinking this week about, and I looked it up, that when we got Dyche, we have this vision, don't we, of Dyche at Burnley being like, oh yeah, in a relegation fight, keeping Burnley up against the odds every season and stuff like that. And apart from his first year, which was 14-15, which was always going to go down because they were, criminally under-resourced and stuff, is he never really had a relegation fight with Burnley at this stage of the season. His skill was keeping Burnley outside the top 3 all season. I mean, he got them into Europe one year. I think there was another mid-table finish. So if you have a look, he wasn't really in a relegation fight in the midst of one like he is now with Everton, with Burnley. I know he finished last season before the end of the season, before the end of the campaign. So in some respects, this is new territory for Dyche at this stage of the campaign. He's not something he really faced with Burnley, and I think that's the other aspect to it. So his thinking has to be clear, and don't cloud the issue by being too clever, which I think he's tried to be in the last 2 games. Don't overthink. Go back to your tried and trusted formation that's worked for you, and that's obviously 4-5-1. And I think, and within that, I play Gray as the striker, because I think for him, and we spoke about this last Friday, Joe, didn't we, that he possibly doesn't trust Gray out wide. Well, we know he doesn't trust Gray out wide. So if you're going to play him up top. So for Dyche, for me, get back to 4-5-1, get the basics right. I think you'll get better support for Garner in the middle of the pitch, and hopefully we won't see what we saw against the second half against Fulham last week. The players in the right positions, I think, for him, and then take it from there. But we'll see in the opening 10-15 minutes tomorrow against Palace whether last week's second half was just an aberration, really, rather than sort of the new manager bounce disappearing.
Joe, in terms of the team news for tomorrow, I think the big news is, well, depending on who you kind of listen to and what you read, Dominic Calvert-Lewin looks to be back in contention. Certainly, he's suspected of being the Everton matchday squad. He tweeted on, was it Wednesday night, saying bring on Saturday. Although Sean Dyche appeared to pour cold water over that a little bit on Thursday's press conference when he said he'll be back in contention. Where do we stand with Dominic Calvert-Lewin? Because it seemingly seems that he's preparing for Saturday. Do you think this is a bit of kidology from Sean Dyche, or is he, thinking, let's not be too hasty and let's not be rushing things too much?
Shouldn't be kidology. I think I think if we're at the point now where Calvert-Lewin isn't likely to be in the squad, then I think it's time to kind of stop playing games with it a little bit. And I think that there has been a little bit of, it probably hasn't been on purpose, but I don't think the communication around the situation for Dominic Calvert-Lewin has been particularly good from the club over the past few weeks. We have had 10 weeks of will he, won't he from Sean Dyche. Okay, after 2 or 3 weeks it got boring, but it's the biggest issue on every Everton fan's mind at the minute, so it's always going to keep on coming up. And it kind of reached an impasse where it was almost like a score draw, where everyone just knew that Dyche wasn't going to really say much about it, so kind of just moved on. And then, before the Man United game, you had the club the Friday before he had the club on its Twitter account, tweeting pictures of Dominic Calvert-Lewin and that, and kind of obviously positive, and 24 hours before a game, and amid rumours that he's getting back to fitness. So I think people are thinking, oh, maybe he might be involved, and he wasn't in the squad at all. So you're thinking that's a bit of a weird juxtaposition of the tweets with the squad that then comes out. And then that whole thing was again repeated for Brentford for a second week, where you had lots of pictures of Dominic Calvert-Lewin and positive noises. And I think there was genuine, surprise in the press room when he wasn't on the bench last week. I thought I think we all can understand that it's going to take a while for him to get up to match sharpness. And it's been very clear that Sean Dyche values people being at 110% before he wants to put them on the pitch, or for certainly to start. So, whether or not Calvert-Lewin would ever come straight into a starting lineup is probably in doubt. But when he wasn't involved last week after going through the same rigmarole, then that did feel a little bit deflating. And I think that it's important to note that Sean Dyche, in the post-match press conferences after Fulham, it was in response to me that Sean Dyche brought up Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and he did that in the context of I'd been asking about Onana and his injury and Coleman and his injury, and this was Dyche, who for 10 weeks has been saying Calvert-Lewin's not the story, stop focusing on him. He brought Calvert-Lewin into the conversation, say he's going to be in contention for next week if he has a good week. So, I just think that if we end up in a situation where that doesn't transpire to be the case, then I just think it's really poor form. I think you can kind of maybe put that the last 10 days down to the last 2 games, maybe give the benefit of doubt and just say a little bit of mixed messaging, a little bit of confusion, a little bit of, is he 95% and we want him to get 98% and he's there or thereabouts. Interesting that last week at the game, he was in the director's box, Amadou Onana. Well, Amadou Onana came in and he was fully dressed in, civilian clothes, normal clothes, as if it looked like he was never going to be part of the match day picture. Dominic Calvert-Lewin came in training gear, essentially. So you wonder if there was a bit of a question mark all the way up to the day of the game and the morning of the game, and it was a last-minute call, which, again, would at least bode well for this week. But I just think that serious questions probably need to be asked about some of the messaging that's coming out from Dyche and the club if Calvert-Lewin wasn't to be involved tomorrow. I think that'd be a real concern. I think at that point you kind of have to start saying, look, you're being a little bit too evasive here.
Especially if he is tweeting Calvert-Lewin himself, saying bring on Saturday.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I mentioned. Even Calvert-Lewin seemed to be kind of, gearing up for a return as well.
But confirming his return, essentially,
That's it. And we accept that these things aren't, I was going to say they aren't science, they are science. Of course it's science, but getting someone up to peak physical condition is a very, very difficult thing to do. And it's going to be, and for someone that's been out for so long with injuries, there's going to be a lot of trepidation about when the right time to throw him in. And that, it's perfectly justified that they might get up to a game day and they might think that, okay, just pull out the last minute because we're not quite 100%. But while those concerns remain, maybe don't kind of seem to be pointing everyone towards the promised return of probably the only person in the squad that can really make a huge difference to helping Everton get out of the situation that they're in at the moment.
Gav, in terms of Calvert-Lewin, obviously there's been a lot of debate around his return. Do you think now that Everton in a position where if he's 95% fit, they've just got to take the gamble and put him back in because time's running out, essentially? There's 7 games to go. They can't wait forever almost and get him in, the perfect ideal help because the position they find themselves in, they need help and they need it now.
Yeah, I can just say, by the way, this is quality podcast when you hear where it's like juxtaposition during the conversation. Also, Joe, I like your previous your experience of the crime reports coming to the fore, that you're clocking what people are wearing in the director's box about when they do it in with the shouts, So we'll all be looking at what Calvert-Lewin's wearing when he gets off the coach tomorrow, won't we now? But that's true, isn't it? There's something to that. Yeah, I don't think we won't be 100% between now and the end of the season, will he, really? But you don't want to get to the end. But I would overstate the importance of Calvert-Lewin because there's a lot more issues within the team. But you don't want to get to the end of the season and Dyche turns around and says, I wish I played Calvert-Lewin more, or I wish I played in that game and I didn't. And I think, you've got to play him, really. And I would hope tomorrow he'd at least be on the bench. I'd still start. I'd start off on the bench, to be honest with you, really, and take it from there. See how the game goes. I wouldn't start him in the game, but he's got to be there tomorrow. As Joe said, I mean, these discussions with Calvert-Lewin, Connor, you've been doing the podcast for a few years. This goes back probably 2 years, doesn't it? Probably to
Rafa, wasn't it, when it first started?
As well, where it was always a little bit vague about what was wrong with him and what his recovery time was, and Lampard as well, where you're saying, we'll be back in a week or be next week's squad, and wasn't. So it predates, the previous 10, 11 weeks really with Dice, this whole issue with Calvert-Lewin's injuries and press conferences and managers' messages. But he's got to play. He's got to be there tomorrow. He's got to be in the matchday squad. He's got to have his tracksuit on, and because he is one player who can make a difference to us, as Joe said. So for me tomorrow, in the matchday squad, and then just take it from there. But he's got to play, because he won't be 100% between now. If you're waiting for him to be 100%, he's not going to be 100% between now and the end of the season. So if he's 80 or 90%, at least get him in and around the matchday squads. I'd rather have Calvert-Lewin than a fourth centre-half on the bench or a 16-year-old fullback. Because even if he just gets on for 15 minutes, that's worth the gamble at this stage of the campaign.
I think as well, Joe, in terms of Calvert-Lewin, I mean, we wrote this, I've wrote this certainly numerous times, and every time he comes back, you kind of feel like he's going to feel pressure like he's never felt before. But this time around, it really does feel like it's all on him a little bit, doesn't it? Because unlike last season where Everton had Richarlison, Anthony Gordon was chipping in with assists and goals, Everton now kind of only got really Calvert-Lewin as the attacking outlet to come in and spark some sort of, not revival as such, but survival bid and make sure that Everton are playing Premier League football next season.
Yeah, and it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because we've got to be careful not to put too much pressure on Dominic Calvert-Lewin. He's somebody that's dealt with a lot of injury setbacks recently, and we know he wants to be out there and he wants to be playing, he wants to be contributing. It can't be easy for him, and he probably, whenever he does step out onto that pitch for the first time since this latest issue, the hamstring issue, there's probably going to be a little bit of fear in him as well, as to kind of anxiousness about how far he can push himself. So I think I don't think there'll be any problem with this. I think I just need to make sure they're 100% behind him and give him all the support he needs during this time. And if if he comes on and he puts one wide after 10 minutes, just keep just welcome the fact that he's there to get in that position in the first place, and that'll be part of the process of getting him up to fitness and sharpness. It'll hopefully get the goals to keep Everton up. So yeah, I mean, but it's it'd be naive to say there isn't pressure on him, because there is a lot of hope, and that again isn't his fault. It's the fault of a club that has failed in terms of its recruitment over recent years, and not created a scenario where it can be without Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And if they had more strength in depth up top, or then there'd be less pressure on him to come back and do so well, and that's not his fault.
Gav, in terms of just one more, on Calvert-Lewin, where do Everton go if he's not involved tomorrow? Where do Everton go from there? Because I know Joe's touched on it here, but it'd be incredible to think, given what we've seen this week in terms of, and we're going to come to that, the Chester friendly, which Sean Dyche, effectively revealed in the press conference, was designed to get Calvert-Lewin minutes in the bank. Calvert-Lewin's if he's not involved tomorrow, where do Everton go from there? And Everton would, be beaten again. Then serious questions are going to be asked, aren't they?
Well, if we get beat tomorrow, it won't be because Calvert-Lewin's not playing. There'll be lots of other reasons there. I said before that I'd put him on the bench. I wouldn't start him. I'd play Gray tomorrow. Get back to 4-5-1, play Gray, which I think is probably his best position for us at the moment, and then see how the game goes, and have Calvert-Lewin on the bench, and if you need them, bring them on. But it goes back to Joe's talk about pressure and putting pressure on Calvert-Lewin. Football is a squad game. You have 18 on match days. one player is not going to make for me, is not going to make that much significant difference to where we are at the moment. And I think we'd be naive to think it would. I get like it lifts fans rather than the players, I would say, at this stage. So if we lose tomorrow, it won't because Calvert-Lewin's not playing. That said, he can make a difference, but we just need to be careful here. You know, said before, he's not Marco van Basten, is he? And he can make a difference, but how much of a difference, I would say, is marginal. And also as well, if you play it's a big ask for him to come on. And if we do play 4-5-1, big ask for him to play a lone striker role, isn't it? When he's not fit, because that's. I mean, ironically enough, you probably say if you're going to play him, you play from the start. You play him in the 4-4-2 where you can shift it a load, rather than 4-5-1 where you've got to do a hell of a lot of work. So yeah, where we go with Gray up top and Calvert-Lewin on the bench for me.
Joe, you know, there was mixed news on the injury front on Thursday afternoon in terms of Seamus Coleman was once again unavailable. But there was one positive in that Amadou Onana had trained. It looks like he could be back in contention to start. And that'll be a big boost for the Blues because with Decore missing and Onana missing last Saturday, it showed big time. Everton missed the pair's energy across the middle of the pitch.
It will be. I think I said on Monday, I think that Amadou Onana's importance to Everton's side grew, or the obviousness of that importance grew in his absence the other day. And he obviously we know he's young and we know he's got a lot to learn, but there's no doubt that he's part of Everton's best centre midfield, I don't think. So hopefully he'll be back, and it's another big game. They need the big game players. Obviously it's quite interesting at thinking what the starting lineup could be tomorrow compared to what it might be on Thursday when Everton play Newcastle, because you think, well, if Onana's touch and go for today, then for Palace, and he should be fit for Newcastle. Coleman might be back. Decore will be back. Calvert-Lewin might have had half an hour in his legs at Selhurst Park, and all of a sudden you start to think that that's an Everton side that can perhaps be a lot more competitive. Perhaps the only frustrating thing, or one of the frustrating things about it, is that those players start to come back as the fixtures get a little bit harder. Newcastle, Leicester, City, and Brighton. But yeah, it would be a massive boost, I think, if Onana can make the starting lineup against Crystal Palace. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I still think that the issue against Fulham was perhaps less. It was as much in the formation and the tactics as it was in the players that were on the pitch. So I'm not saying, I think against Fulham, if Everton had started 4-5-1, even in the absence of Decore and Onana through suspension and injury, I think they would have started that game better and, perhaps been able to take the lead in that game, and that could have changed the dynamics completely when you look at the momentum and the trajectory that Fulham were on at that point. And, it's frustrating they didn't, but so I'm not saying it's not the end of the world if Onana can't play. I still think go 4-5-1, and I think that there's personnel in there that can perhaps at least put up more of a fight than they did against Fulham in the first half hour the other day. But there's no doubt Everton is strong with Onana. So if he's back, you say he's out training on Thursday, so that's a positive sign. And if he can be back in the starting lineup, then that'll be a huge boost.
Gav, Joe said there, Everton are a stronger team with Onana, but I think before last week the jury seems to be out on him a little bit. Some fans, but I don't think we're too impressed with some of his performances against Manchester United. But in terms of last week, it was definitely a case of you don't know what you've got till it's not there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you forget he's a young lad, isn't he? And his sort of top flight experience in his career is limited. So this is new territory for him. So he's I'm using a Grand National sort of analogy like the week late, but he's lasted the pace well, hasn't he? Really, in those circumstances, in a high pressurised league and the struggling teams, and I'm convinced he's been carrying a knock for a month or so, to be honest with you. And I think Dyche may have denied it, but I think he's been carrying a knock. And I think if James Garner is playing, we need the three to protect Garner and what he can do with the ball. And I think Onana coming back, but Garner, Gay, and Garner, I think that's quite I've suggested that as a midfield before, even with Decore in the team, and I think that would be a far more balanced midfield than Decore. Get me names like this: Decore, Onana, and Garner. I think is I think is still imbalanced, and I think bringing in James Garner for Takura gives us a little bit more balance in midfield and somebody who can pass the ball, and I think that would be good. The other thing I'd say about Onana, and I'm just putting it out there, if Coleman's not playing tomorrow, if Onana plays, would you make him captain?
Pickford to be captain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know if there's be much doubt about that. But Onana, obviously, he captained Belgium the other day, didn't he? International break to the band. I mean, yeah. Obviously, Pickford was Lampard's choice. So I mean, maybe. I'm trying to remember who was captain last week. Actually, was it Pickford against him? Surely it would have been Pickford last week, wasn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember who was captain last week. But I was just thinking out of the box. When you start mixing things up, and we said, didn't we, that saying that Coleman's a bit, on the field is very big presence, and Onana is, and I mean, missed both those presence on, both their presence on the pitch last Saturday. I'm just wondering, Coleman. I'm just thinking about do something different. If Coleman wasn't there tomorrow, when we're looking for a bit of inspiration, and Onana was fit, just to change it round a little bit. Yeah, quite possibly. And do something a little bit different. And would you make him skipper? Just for the discussion, really, as an option. Thinking outside the box a little bit. And that said, though, that would be a bonus to me. Just get him back on the pitch, as you say, kind of quite rightly. You don't know what you've got till it's gone, and I think you've seen that for all the world last Saturday, albeit the 4-4-2 magnified that miss as well.
Right, lads, we're going to do something different for the podcast now.
Oh, this is frightening. It's terrifying.
We do this all the time on the Echo site, but we're going to do it on pod, in person, pick our teams for tomorrow, because there's a lot of debate out there about who should play where. So we'll pick our start 11s, and you can base them on Calvert-Lewin and Onana being fit.
Sorry, just what we would choose if we were Dyche.
If you were Sean Dyche sitting here right now and you're picking your team for Crystal Palace, the best team you think to take on Crystal Palace in the best formation, this is now your chance to pick that team of formation. So we'll start in goal. Obviously, I don't think anyone's going to say it other than Jordan Pickford.
Yep.
At the back, 2 centre-backs. I would go Yerry Mina and Michael Keane. Joe?
Yeah.
You've got to explain the absence of Tarkowski, surely.
Well, I didn't think he was very good last week. I thought he looked a little bit, he ran ragged a little bit. And I think Yerry Mina is the best centre-back at the club and always has been. Just obviously fitness issues have always prevented him showcasing his true talent. And I think he's sat on the bench for far too long now. And I think it's time for a freshen up at the back. I didn't think Michael Keane was as bad as what people thought out last week. Yeah, he kind of didn't cover him. Wasn't great, but I thought Tarkowski was at fault for at least 2 goals. And I think in recent weeks his performance levels have dipped a little bit. And I think just given how ruthless Sean Dyche was with Connor Cody, in terms of, he has one real stinker against Aston Villa, and we haven't seen him since. I don't think Tarkowski should be immune from the same punishment.
What are you saying, Gav?
Interesting. I was going to say Mina than Tarkowski, but what I would say in Connor's defence is that Keane is a better centre half. He's at his best centre half when Mina's playing.
They've got good under Carlo.
Yeah, I think Mina makes the other centre half look better. Always. And I think Keane always looks better with always his best performances and spells in the team would be when Mina's played. So I sort of get where you're coming from, because I'll have Mina. And I was going to say Tarkowski, but I could see why you say Keane. We could completely complicate matters like this and say, let's play it back today.
Well, no, let's not go back.
Let's meet everybody's demands, but I think it'll be 4, won't it? I'd still say Mina and Tarkowski, but I see what you're saying about Mina and Keane. That actually could work better. But I'd still go Mina and Tarkowski with Patterson.
Well, come on to full-back, so hold.
Oh, that's all right.
Joe,
don't know the rules of this game yet, Connor, so forgive me.
I should have explained it better, to be fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of clamour for Mina to be involved now, isn't there? And understandably so, given the fact that Everton have started to not just leak goals, but leak opportunities, haven't they? I think that's been one of the worries about Manchester United and Fulham. It's not just that, they conceded from every shot. They conceded a few shots on target and everyone went in. Both could have scored more. By the end of that second half, it was probably more likely to have ended 5-1 to Fulham than it was to have been finished 3-3, I think. So, I mean, I quite like. I mean, I don't think that Tarkowski's getting bombed. I think that obviously, I think that the fact that he has the Burnley legacy with Sean Dyche, I think, counts for everything. But I'll go Mina and Tarkowski initially as centre backs because I think it's slightly more likely. That's what I'd go. I think Mina's probably. He's got 7 games left of his Everton career, hasn't he? They may as well try and use him. I'm a little bit kind of loath to there's going to be changes around the pitch and consistency matters, but this is probably the last chance to try something a little bit different to potentially create the foundation for something that could work for the 6 games that follow. So if they found the solution tomorrow, then it can still save the season. So go on, I'll go. I'll go Mina and Tarkowski.
So full-backs, I think it'll be Nathan Patterson at right-back, simply because he's a right-back and he's got to, like Joe said earlier, go back to basics and just play a right-back at right-back. And I think if he snubs him again, it's an indication that he clearly doesn't really fancy him. And Mykolenko probably picks himself at left-back, despite not covering himself in glory last weekend, on the simple fact of Godfrey has had, 2 stingers on the bounce, essentially, and moving Vinagre now for the season, there's no one else to go there.
Yeah, I'm the same. Mykolenko and Patterson for me.
Gav?
Yeah. I'd go with that. No, but nobody's mentioned Holgate at all in passing in the last few weeks, have they? We assume that he's just not in the thinking.
He's not in the starting lineup, is he? I think he's fit, and where Dyche has experimented with him, it's a defensive centre midfielder, isn't it? So.
Yeah, he came on at Arsenal, didn't he? I think. I think those are the 2 full-backs.
Well, I think though you raise an interesting point there, though, Gav, because if Holgate gets the nod at right back over Patterson, what does that say again? Because you can't. I said last week about Godfrey coming in and playing. Yeah. And it was kind of you kind of got to stick with Patterson because he's the natural right back, but Godfrey was the one giving the nod, wasn't he, over him?
Yeah, I think it goes back to fitness, doesn't it? This whole Dyche thing about, I think he requires a certain level of fitness of players, doesn't he? Quite obviously, and he's not prepared to play players who are, not near to full fitness. And I'm just wondering what Patterson's fitness is at the moment. But I think you've got to play him. I think if you brought him on last week, you got to play him on Saturday. I wouldn't have a problem there. And he was good at the start of the season, to be honest with you. I thought he was one of our better players.
Mm-hmm. So we move on to the middle of the pitch. So I'm going to go 4-5-1. So 3 midfield. My 3 central midfielders will be Amadou Onana, James Garner, and Alex Iwobi. I think Idrissa Gana Gueye needs to go to the team. I think he's struggled for a while now, and I think them 3, just a bit of pace, a bit of energy, and a little bit of something different is what Everton needs in the middle of the pitch right now. Joe?
I'm keeping Idrissa Gueye, and I'm having Gueye, Garner, and Onana in my centre midfield. I kind of understand what you're saying. I like Iwobi in the centre midfield. I just think that, especially with having Patterson at right back and Palace being strong out wide, I think that Iwobi offers a bit more defensively down the right than the logical replacement, which I'm guessing for you is going to be Damari Gray. And he's got good distribution as well. And if we're going to end up in a situation where Calvert-Lewin could be probably coming onto the pitch, it makes sense to have him out wide as well.
Gav?
See why you've invented this game, Connor, with your team selection, to be fair. Putting Iwobi in and dropping Tarkowski. I I've given the game away here, haven't I? I said my three would be Garner, Gay, Garner and Onana, because I think that's our best balance today. But I see where you're coming from with the Wolby to a degree. A bit more creativity through the middle. But I think that our best balance today is the three I've put in, to be honest with you, at the moment. With slight worries about Garner, Gay, to be honest with you.
Well, he's the reason why I put Iwobi in midfield, because I don't think he's done much for a couple of weeks now, and I think it feels like he inevitably gets to sort of 60 minutes, having already been booked, and it's taken off because he kind of runs, he's run his course, and I just think try and maybe do something different and freshen things up.
I just think that three is possibly defensively a little bit lightweight, but I mean, at the end of the day, we've got to perhaps do something different here, haven't we? But I'd start with them today and see where that goes.
Okay, out wide, I'm going to go obviously Demarai Gray and Dwight McNeil. Joe?
Yeah, McNeil on the left, Iwobi on the right.
I'd actually do the other way round. I'd do Iwobi on the left and McNeil on the right, because I think with Mikalenko, you've got, and we saw it last week to a degree, you've got a left-footed left back, and they like to come in from out wide, don't they, Palace? And I think it's handy to have certainly somebody who's playing on the Palace right to have a right-footed player out wide, for when they come inside. And I'd have McNeil and Iwobi, but I'd swap them round.
Okay.
To be honest with you.
Up front, leading the line, I would have Ellis Sims. I know Calvert-Lewin obviously comes in contention, but I think he'll be better served doing half an hour. And I just think Sims' strength maybe gives Everton a little bit more of a kind of out-and-out frontman than Demarai Gray, because I think with Demarai Gray, it relies on him getting in behind, and I don't know if Everton have got the creativity and the ability to get their forward in behind. I think more of a battle. Gav, I can see your edging to come in, so I'll go to you before going to Joe.
No, because I was just thinking that, considering we've got a relatively small squad, and that's what we've been complaining about all season, the lack of options. There's not exactly like a great consistency in our team selection here, which shows, like Joe Dyche would say, these are the problem I'm facing as the manager in terms of the squad I've inherited.
I think we've lost Gav.
A weird diversification of opinion when we've only got 14 players to pick from, both in terms of personnel and formation. So yeah, I would have put Ellis Sims. I've given the game I'd play Gray up front, because I think that's his best position. That's what's worked for Dyche. So Gray for me, and Sims and Calvert-Lewin on the bench.
Yeah, great for me as well. I think Dyche has tried all of his potential attackers up top by themselves, and if we're sticking with 4-5-1, Gray's been the most effective by some distance. So
you're not going to ask us to pick a subs bench, Connor, because we could be here for another hour based on the last 15 minutes. No subs bench. I think our depth of knowledge of the under 18s and under 23s would be called into action if we were naming if we take up the subs bench.
but we're all agreed that Calvert-Lewin should be on the subs bench.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
he's got to be.
Yeah,
you've got at least to get him on, I think, for at least half an hour, 20 minutes. No matter what the score is at that point, you've got to try and get him on the pitch to get some game time in him. Yeah. In the hope of perhaps using that's because I think that's what you've got to be looking at now, is try and get him in a position to start against Newcastle.
So we've all picked three completely different teams, and haven't we? I think, to be honest with you.
But the only thing we are in agreements on is 4-5-1 over 4-4-2.
Yeah.
So if the message is listening, the message is a clear one.
Yeah.
Before we go, gents, of course, we like to keep to tradition on the Royal Blue podcast, as well as some new inventions, and it is time for some predictions. When it comes to predicting Everton results this year, I think you've got more chance of picking lottery numbers than predicting what Everton are going to do. Gav, I'll start with you, because after last weekend's prediction ahead of Fulham this afternoon, and it turned out to be are you hoping no reverse?
It won't surprise you after forecasting Everton 3-0 home win against Fulham. My horse in the Grand National fell at the second. So I was consistent. I think before I talk about the results, it's worth saying that the problem with the Fulham's defeat last week was I get all the teams got beat, but we'll see the damage of that defeat this weekend, won't we, in the fixtures midweek, because there's a lot of teams playing each other in and around the bottom, aren't they? Leicester play Wolves, don't they? Bournemouth play West Ham, don't they? During the week, Bournemouth play Southampton. I think Leicester play Leeds, don't they, on Tuesday?
Yeah. The only one I think go to Anfield is the one tomorrow.
Yeah.
I suspect.
Yeah. So we're going to see the damaging effects of the Fulham result, not last weekend, but this weekend and midweek. So that's the terrifying thing for me. Going back to the original question, but having said that, I'm never ever going to pick Everton to win 3-0 ever again, even if it's top of the table. I'm going to go for a hard end, and I think it could be useful 1-1 draw, and a point would not be the worst result for us tomorrow. But I'm more interested in the performance. That you spoke about mentality and new manager bounce and stuff like that. What I want to see tomorrow is commitment, hard work, the sort of things that Dyche had in his first 9 or 10 weeks here. And if we do that, I think we can get a 1-1 draw.
Joe?
Yeah, I go 1 each as well. I think if we can get 1 each, Dominic Calvert-Lewin gets half an hour on the pitch and comes through it unscathed, I think that's a positive day, I think.
I am going to go for a 2-1 win for the Blues. I think the away day hoodoo will come to an end, and I think we will be celebrating come 5 o'clock. I can see
all you need, Connor, is a Yerry Mina winner, and you've got to pull out, haven't you, really?
More a Yerry Mina equaliser and a Michael Keane winner.
Oh, even better, yeah.
And,
has been known.
Well, as we saw, he's the best finisher in the club, Gav. You can't argue with the facts.
Yeah, no. Get that.
But gents, thank you very much for joining me today. I think we've chewed the fat enough over all things Everton, but we will of course be back on Monday to look back on Everton's visit to Selhurst Park, and of course look ahead to Thursday night's game against Newcastle United at Goodison Park. But for today, thank you very much for listening to the Road Blue Podcast.